Thank you to RocketNode for sponsoring today's video. Sakhal, a cold, unforgiving and brutal environment. Or at least that's what I thought when I first arrived on the shores of DayZ Frostline's newest map. My name is Alex, and in today's episode I'm going to be showing you a few of the top tips to help you get started within this masterpiece of a map. These tips are all aimed at either new or returning players to DayZ, or console players who haven't played some of PC's more hardcore community servers. Before we jump into today's tips though, I'll admit I'm not the best survivalist, so many of these tips are actually from trial and error or from members of our chat during our live streams of the early access event. But fear not, I've also included a few top tips from other members of the community, so make sure to stick around and find out what they've got to say. If you learn something new, then leave a like and consider subscribing. Starting off, let's talk about Sakhal itself. Sakhal is a remote island off of eastern Russia, and as a result has a much lower climate than Chernobyl. The map is split in between two biomes, the drier, forested area found near the coasts, and the thicker, more wintry zone in the centre of the island. Players will usually spawn on the coast facing north as usual, and with the rough aim of making their way inland collecting loot before heading to the southern peninsula for the top tier military gear. Sakhal is home to intense blizzards, murderous wolves and bears, and crippling waterborne diseases. You're going to need to keep your wits about you. But first, a word from today's sponsor. I would never promote something I didn't truly believe in, so when RocketNode reached out to me to sponsor today's video, it was a no-brainer. RocketNode combines innovative game server hosting with an easy-to-use control panel, affordable prices, and rocket-fast support. I've been using RocketNode for my DayZ server for the past few months and they've been great. The best bit about RocketNode is, as soon as you've ordered, your server is ready to go instantly, and with RocketGuard DDoS protection you couldn't be in safer hands. With 7 different server locations across the globe to choose from and a multitude of games such as DayZ, Rust, Ark Survival, 7 Days to Die and much more, there really isn't a better option. RocketNode have even been kind enough to give me a discount code, so if you want your own DayZ server to use the link in the bio and use code KING to get 25% off all services. Thank you once again to RocketNode. Tip number 1 is get warm quick. Straight away you'll immediately notice the effects of Sakhal's climate. If you don't get warm quickly, you'll succumb to the elements in no time. First, you'll catch a cold, and before you'll know it, you'll have pneumonia and be 6 feet under. So let's get proactive. You'll notice DayZ now spawns you with a knife, so let's use it. Get 2 long sticks to break down and 2 pieces of bark, and create a hand drill kit and a fireplace. DayZ has a new and improved temperature mechanic which we'll touch on later, but for now let's make a fire in either a fireplace, in a house or outside in the woods, and make sure you've got 2 pluses next to your body temperature icon before we move on. Next up we've got food. Okay, you've got warm, but food is a vital resource, and while it is plentiful on Sakhal, it is not in the form you might be used to. Ground loot will now be frozen, meaning it cannot be eaten immediately. You'll need to defrost it first. Place the item next to the fire until it's thawed and then cook away. You can also defrost items within your inventory, but it's going to take a long time and you'll need a heat buff to do so. Fishing is your safest bet in a coastal town. The seas surrounding Sakhal are plentiful and can provide you with ample nutrition. However, once you move inland, you won't be able to find any streams that aren't frozen over, so your primary source of food will become hunting wild animals such as goats, reindeers and rabbits. Make sure you're never too far from a hot meal, as this will also help keep your temperature up. Which brings us nicely to our first content creator top tip, from Lucis here, who says, fish are friends and food. Get fishing as soon as possible. They're your best bet early on to keep your stats up as you start your adventure inland. But be careful, freshies are known to slap you around the chops with them in spawns too. Number 3. Fishing in Sakhal. Okay, fishing's been updated for Frostline, so let's get you a rod. A rod can either be found as ground loot or crafted. You can craft a rod by using 1 long stick and a piece of rope and then attaching a fishing hook or jig. Combine all 3 items and use 2 stacks of rags to make rope if you can't find any. If you're using a jig, you're good to go, but if you're using a hook, you'll need some worms which can be dug up from the ground with any sharp object. Don't forget, a hoe will give you 3 worms at once to save you some time. A neat thing you'll notice with the worms is that they'll now be immediately added to your hook when picked up, saving a bit of time. Now you don't need to combine them. Now let's fish. It's been massively simplified now. Simply cast your rod out and when a fish bites, release the button. If you're then going to move inland or you just want to save some space, don't forget to deconstruct your crafted rod by taking the hook off and using a knife on it, and then storing the rope and the hook in your inventory for next time. Which brings us along nicely to our next content creator top tip, which comes from Frankie, who says, don't forget, if you can't find a hook for your fishing rod, you can now make wooden ones by combining a knife with short sticks. Okay, with your food sorted, it's time to focus on hydration. Water is a vital resource you'll need to manage on Sakhal, and you might be fooled into thinking with all the snow this isn't an issue, but you'd be very, very wrong. Due to the volcanic ash on the island, the snow is full of heavy metals, which means if you eat or drink it, it will give you heavy metal poisoning. Heavy metal poisoning is a bad thing to catch, especially early on. You'll know you've got it when the sickness icon appears and your hearing becomes muffled. Water can be found in springs. They look a little bit like dog kennels or small houses, and they have completely replaced wells on Sakhal. Thankfully, they're much easier to find. When you're in a town, just look for a small dirt path and follow it until you reach a spring. They're usually on the side of hills or tucked into little wooden areas. You can drink from it or fill your container and they will never freeze over. If you want to be able to drink snow, you'll need to find the chelating tablets to purify your water, or the new filtering bottle. Simply add the snow to the bottle and you're good to go. Alright, next let's talk about insulation. This is something you're going to need to keep a big eye on in Frostline. You can tell what insulation level an item has just by hovering over it. Make sure you're taking the clothing with the highest insulation levels possible. This will keep you warmer for longer once you've achieved your heat buff. Make sure to cover up as much of your body as possible: hands, feet, gloves, face and head. Adding a form of chest protection such as a plate carrier or ballistic vest should also help. Once you're fully insulated up, you should be able to achieve the 3rd heat buff status, which is the maximum you can get. Our next content creator tip comes from Cam Can't Run, who says, don't spend too much time in your first spawn town. It's likely already been looted and you'll only be left with the scraps. Now you're more set up for your run, let's move inland. Our next tip on navigation is important. This massive volcano sits roughly centre north of the map and acts as a great navigational feature. Once you head inland, the forests become a lot denser, and if you get caught in a blizzard, you'll lose all visibility and won't be able to see a thing. So it's important to keep an eye on where you're going. Lots of people are going to struggle with Sakhal because rather than knowing where they're going, they'll actually have to navigate themselves. My advice to you is, if you can't figure out where you are, then head up to the highest point you can find and try and spot the volcano using the improved view distance. This should act as your North Star until you become more familiar with the map. Okay, so you're making your way inland. Best be aware of predators. Not the Chris Hansen type, more the 4-legged variety. Wolves and bears are rampant within Sakhal's inland, and they love nothing more than to send you back to the coast. If you hear a bear roar, try and stealthily move away without aggroing it, but if you hear wolves in the distance, they're coming for you, and you'll need to fight them off. If you hear wolves but they never arrive, it means they've attacked somebody else, so be wary that you might have company. You might be fooled into thinking you've now been blessed with a free lunch, but you'd be wrong. Predators can still send you to the grave even when dead. All predator meat will make you sick if you eat it, and if you think you can pop a multi and eat the meat anyway like your favourite streamers were during the event, my classified source embedded deep within Bohemia Interactive has informed me that this will no longer work. Thankfully, you can still eat the fat from predators, so keep hold of that. Just don't get it mixed up with that human fat you've been keeping to feed a tied up freshie. Okay, so you've made it this far. Now let's talk about surviving inland. You'll need to keep an eye on all your different stats and watch out for geared players. If you can make your way to the thermal springs at the bottom of the volcano, you can actually get a heat buff by standing next to it. Just don't get in it because you'll get burned, and watch out for snipers in the woodlines as you'll be super exposed. In fact, you'll be exposed pretty much everywhere inland. It's just sprawling fields or dense woods, so make sure you've got your head on a swivel. If you need to start a fire, try and do it in the woods somewhere just before nightfall, because starting one inside a house will allow all sorts of degenerate individuals to spot you via the smoke, and they will no doubt come knocking on your door looking for some of your precious loot. Try not to make fires in the open at night, as it's a great way to end up with a bullet in the back of your skull. Look for secluded dips within the ground or thick trees to cover as much of the light as possible. Inventory management is number 9. You're doing well, you've stayed alive, you've not died to the elements, and perhaps you've even fought off some bandits by this point. You're pretty geared as things go. You might be starting to realise now that you're really struggling for space. DayZ Frostline has updated your inventory, which massively reduced the amount you can carry. The days of carrying 6 weapons and 3 weeks worth of food are long gone, so take a look at your inventory and ask yourself, what do you really need? If you've got containers, then make sure you're storing your most precious loot in them to protect them, and also making sure they're full to maximise room. Clothing and bag spawns are quite rare inland, so I'd advise you always carry a sewing kit or duct tape to keep your gear in good working order. Last thing you want to happen is your jacket or bag to break, meaning you've got to leave to go find some more items. Combine pills if you can, and don't carry 10 different ways of starting fires like I do. A full box of matches will start 50 fires, so you probably don't need more than one full pack at a time. Which brings us nicely to our final content creator top tip from Cobra, who says, on this map you must make use of cooking pots in order to stay hydrated for longer. They are also an OP way of carrying extra loot. Number 10. Southern Peninsula. If you've got this far, congratulations. Now you can start to play the game properly. It's about now you're going to be heading to the Southern Peninsula for some of that sweet military loot. On this island you'll find plate carriers, AKs and SVDs, and perhaps even more within the secret bunker, but we will cover that in another video. You can only access the peninsula on foot one way, via this land bridge, which is a natural choke point, meaning firefights and campers in this location are highly likely. Keep your head on a swivel as you cross, and once you're on, you'll need to be like an owl to stay above ground. The peninsula is home to some of the best loot and the worst cover. It's a sparse, open environment, meaning it's very easy to get caught out in the open. Most people down this part of the map will have some form of sniper rifle too, so don't get caught wandering along unaware. It's also horrendous for food. Don't even think about entering this island without a few snacks or some way of fishing, because there's virtually no ground loot food spawns and basically zero animals bar wolves. Be careful on the coast too. Players will be on the lookout for starving survivors cooking up food, so make sure your campfires are on point. When you're down here, you've got to pay attention to your stats. Don't wander through a thick blizzard for an hour and a half and starve to death with all your new amazing loot like I did. With all these tips, this should put you in good stead for a pretty solid crack at Sakhal. None of these tips are groundbreaking, but they should help you skip some of the trial and error I had to endure and give you a good head start against some other people. If you can think of any tips that I haven't mentioned, then feel free to leave them down in the comments for others to see. If you've learned something new, leave a like and subscribe, and if you want to watch me play live, head over to my Twitch channel where I'm streaming almost every day. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.